Scofflaw is an episode that I feel like I always forget existed. I mean, it's a good episode, but it's one of those episodes that it never stands out to me for some reason. Even though I always remember the one storyline with the friend of Jerry's and George's lying, saying that he's had cancer when he really hasn't. But that's really the only story I would remember when I see, well, if I saw the Scofflaw, I'd be like, oh, what was the episode? But you watch it, it's not too bad. So, it's one of those in-between episodes for me, where I like it, but it's not the one I'm always going to remember. But, episode 99, of course, is the Scofflaw as well. We also learn about, what does the term Scofflaw mean? Well, Scofflaw refers to a person who breaks laws that they're not basically criminal in the nature, but they do a lot of, minor, violations, like parking violations or tax laws and whatnot. Basically, people who have to just owe a lot of fines because they don't, meet their deadlines and whatnot. Of course, that ends up being, someone you expect. No, but anyways, the Scofflaw starts off with George on the street. He runs into a friend of his and Jerry's, Gary Fogle, and George says that he hadn't heard from Gary for months. He's been busy, and George, like, with what? And he goes, oh, chemotherapy, bye, and walks away. George Perry didn't know that his good friend had apparently cancer. Kramer also was, on the streets roaming, and he was, some guy drives past and drops a bunch of garbage off of his roof, and Kramer calls him a pig. There was a cop standing there with an eye patch, though, that he thought, Kramer thought that he was called, the cop thought that Kramer was calling him a pig. So obviously there's a miscommunication there, basically. And of course, Kramer goes back and starts telling Jerry about, his running with the cop and whatnot. But apparently also the cop got pissed off because the guy he was writing a parking ticket for pulled away whenever Kramer called him a pig. Well, he thought Kramer called him a pig, at least. George shows up. And then he's like all serious, like, Kramer, I gotta talk to Jerry alone. And of course, he didn't want Jerry to be Kramer be in the room. So finally Kramer leaves, and then George's like, I was gonna say it. Gary Fogle had cancer, and Jerry's like, oh, I knew that for the longest time. And he's like, what do you mean for the longest time? And then he's swarming out to tell anyone, and then that's when it's revealed that George can't keep a secret. So that's why he didn't say anything to George. Of course, he then finds out that Elaine knew because Jerry told her, because she keeps a secret. So George was a little miffed that, nobody told him that his good friend Gary had cancer. I think Kramer knew also, I can't remember. But anyways, so of course, George was taken back by that. He was going to confront Gary about that later. Kramer, though, told Elaine he saw her old boyfriend, Jake Jarmel, on TV, which Elaine's had two very, dumb breakups with him. She broke up with him. They broke up over punctuation. And they also broke up, remember, because Elaine stopped to get some Juji fruits before driving to the hospital to see Jake. But apparently Jake had a book he just finished writing. He was signing at a bookstore. But Kramer said he's been on TV for a while and he's seen those glasses that he's been wearing, and he thinks they're really cool and he wants a pair. Doesn't wear glasses. So Kramer goes and sees Jake. And Kramer mentions where you get the glasses from. Jake does not want to tell him where he got the glasses from. So that sucked. He didn't get it. George then goes to have lunch with Gary, which they're talking. They point out some girl in there who literally doesn't acknowledge anybody, but yeah, people, obviously somebody wants to make conversation with her because they think she's a good-looking woman. Well, George, of course, just tells Gary, he was still very, hurt by, by not being told that he had cancer, in which he tells him, what's it called? He says, sorry, you can't keep a secret or whatnot. And then, of course, he also said, oh, by the way, he talked to Debbie Bibello, and she says hi. And which this starts another trend where apparently, saying someone said hi was a big deal to some people in this episode, as it was a good story. A funny little underrated story I thought was thrown in there. But George seemed impressed by it. But then Gary told George he would make it up to him by getting him a parking spot in the city. All he had to pay for was just the taxes, which, wasn't going to be that much for it. Because he has connections in the city. So he's like, okay. And George goes, but I still want you to be able to tell me a secret. He wants Gary to prove to George that he could trust him. In which Gary says, truth is, I never had cancer. So George, of course, not only is bad at keeping a secret, he's bad at hiding about the fact that he does have a secret. So, that unfortunately is that. So that doesn't end good. But but then we then see Kramer is back talking with that cop, apologizing, saying that, Kramer saying, no, so I was calling the litter bug a pig, not you. He says how much he likes policemen. But then the cop tells Kramer the story about, he has written several parking tickets for this one guy who has never paid the fine. And since then, he has piled up more parking tickets than anyone in New York City. And he's pursued him only to see him slip away time and time again. He never got a clean look at his face, but he's become his white whale, which is a Moby Dick reference. And Kramer that day was, and he says how that day was yesterday, but thanks to him, he doesn't know if he'll ever get a chance to see him again. But Kramer says how he likes the eye patch, which apparently there was a scene explaining why the cop was wearing an eye patch. He had like a sty in his eye, but Kramer thought it was cool and literally wore an eye patch for like most of the rest of the episode. And he looked like a pirate. And of course, Kramer says, I want to be a pirate. Be kind of made like a reference of like an opposite of opposite of when Jerry said, but I don't want to be a pirate, or I don't want to be a cowboy. Kramer goes, I want to be a pirate. Arrgh, as he wears an eye patch just to basically, he thinks this is cool to wear an eye patch. It's Kramer. It's the Kramer trend. Like, he thinks it's cool to wear an eye patch when they're saying it's cool to, eat fresh fruit instead of refrigerated fruit. Like, fruit just comes right fresh and whatnot. Or he wanted to, there's an episode we haven't gone to yet where he wanted to wear, clothes when they came right out of the dryer. Of course, ends up being eventually the oven because he ran out of quarters. All these Kramer trends. So now he thinks it's cool to dress up like a pirate. So of course, Jerry and Elaine were talking, and Kramer was in there also. Saying how Jake Jarmel refused to admit to where he got his glasses from. To which Elaine said she's gonna, go down and confront him. And then as she goes to leave, Kramer says that he had told Jake that Elaine said hi. Which Elaine's like, no, why would you do that? She goes, I had the upper hand in this. Now you're giving him the upper hand by telling him that I said hi. So then she goes to see Jake, just for Jake to say it doesn't make much of a difference. But then Elaine was going to go out of her way, though, because she wanted to feel like she had the upper hand again. She was going out of her way to find out where he got those glasses. He wouldn't want to tell anybody where he got the glasses from. Anyways, before we get to that part, George then shows up, and George is acting weird. Here's where it says, here's where I say how George may be bad at keeping a secret. He's bad at hiding the fact that he has a secret. Because Jerry basically was just like, knew he was hiding something, but kept, like, just tormenting him until he finally just screamed out. He goes, "Gary Fogle never had cancer!" And, you know, obviously, you know, Jerry was not happy about that. George tells him how nothing was wrong, and how he had been alive for 2 months. They said the doctors thought he had cancer, but the surgery revealed he never actually had it. And then, so Jerry was upset, though, because Gary was so worried about losing more hair. If he got, from getting chemo, he thought that he gave him an unlimited gift certificate at the hair team for men, just to put his mind at ease. And now, of course, Jerry wants to go back and take it back and tell him off. But, of course, you know, George is saying, wait, you can't do that because he's given him a parking space. And also, he wants to prove to Gary he can keep a secret. Even though Jerry's, you know, obviously upset with this because Gary only wanted to find a reason to get more hair because he didn't like the fact he was going bald. So, that's that. And then, of course, you know, Jerry still wants to tell him off, but George says, "You be nice." And, of course, later in the episode, wherever Jerry is sitting there with Gary, he goes, "You be nice." He's thinking of George going, "You be nice. You be nice." Oh, man. And, of course, you know, Jerry then meets Gary for lunch, where that all happens. And, of course, you know, Gary's showing Jerry his you know, his toupee that he got for him to get hair, and whatnot. And of course, there's when Kramer enters saying he wants to be a pirate and whatnot, and he meets Gary. And then he also mentioned how the eye patch is itchy. George, meanwhile, though, he goes, and that Debbie that Gary had said hi earlier, George picks her up and, you know, thinks he's going on a date, but realizes that, no, she didn't say hi. She said, "Give him my regards." So, obviously, saying hi meant absolutely nothing, which George felt taken back by. Meanwhile, Elaine runs into some guy who was wearing the same glasses that Jake was wearing. And she basically bargains with him to buy the glasses, which he found out where they were from. And she got them. And even though he could barely see without them. So, in the midst of that, in the midst of all of that, Elaine, the guy who Elaine bought the glasses off of was walking in the middle of the street, and George tried to swerve around him, but of course, off the distraction, distraction, that same police car was trying to you know, get a parking ticket to the same guy he's been trying to give it to for the longest time. He drives off again. Kramer was in the vicinity, though, and realizes though that the white whale is Newman. Newman is the Scofflaw. So Kramer was going to bust him for it. So, and then, of course, you know, so back at the apartment, but, of course, you know, that's when, of course, George and Jerry were back at the apartment. And, of course, Jerry found out, you know, obviously that, you know, that Gary lied to him because he wanted to get the wig. And he also was able to pick up that woman that earlier in the episode, George was saying how would never talk to anybody. And all this. And also, George was saying how Debbie was saying how she fell in love with Gary because of Gary having cancer, which, you know, George's upset about that as well. And then it looks like he was starting to think about getting the wig himself. And then Elaine goes back and rubs it in Jake's face that she's got the glasses, which Jake was upset. And of course it's revealed that the glasses are from Malaysia. And then of course Kramer eventually interrupts, confronts Newman about him being the Scofflaw and you know, having to, you know, fess up about these parking tickets that he won't pay or whatnot. And of course George, for the heck of it, goes to start, you know, checking out, see if he would like any of the toupees to get some hair for him. He thought so. Elaine, meanwhile, met Mr. Lippman, her old boss from Pendant Publishing, for lunch. And he was saying how it's been no series. He's had a dream about his own publishing house, and if Jake Jarmel's book does well, it could be what helps them, get back into business again. And Elaine was like, that's so exciting. She wouldn't have to run around looking for socks anymore. And then he then tells Elaine, how he likes her glasses. She then gives them to Mr. Lippman. I think this is a way of Elaine trying to get back at Jake, because Lippman takes them, and right when Lippman and Jake are giving that type of speech in like the closing scene, Jake realizes the glasses he's wearing. He gets all upset that he's wearing the glasses now. So then Elaine was just like back to doing socks again. So she basically did that just so she can get the upper hand once again on him. And then Newman was taken to court for all of his parking tickets. Then they were saying the best thing to do was to keep his car in a parking garage, convenient to the home and whatnot, which Newman kept saying he can't afford, but basically just to stop him from getting more parking tickets, he won't pay the fines. But unfortunately, because of that the space that was taken for that car, that caused Gary to not be able to get George his parking spot. So because of that, George basically, let Jerry loose and let Jerry confront Gary about him lying about, his cancer and whatnot. But George, though, gets a wig, and the episode ends with George walking into Monk's with his toupee on, and a woman recognizes him and basically offers him a seat. How's your life? All right? Yeah, not bad. Then she just pushes the seat open, and George just acknowledges that he's obviously being noticed for how good he looks with his wig on. And that's a Scofflaw. Again, it's a good episode, but it's definitely not one that stands out to me for sure, but it's still a good episode. Of course, a lot of people say that, there was the episode back in season 4, The Ticket, where Newman was in court over a parking ticket trying to weasel his way out of it. Someone said they should have had it come out there that he has this history of, not paying his parking tickets and whatnot. But, there's that. And, of course, Elaine still stuck working with Mr. Pitt also. But that's the Scofflaw, guys. What are your thoughts on the Scofflaw episode? The next episode, next two reviews, is the 2-part Highlight 100 episode. We're going to talk briefly, of course, about the next 2 episodes, which is a clip show of the first 100 episodes of the season. We've made it to 100, guys. So once again, guys, slap a like on the video, subscribe our content on my channel, follow me on Twitter as well at DemandAirboy93. Till then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch you all later. Have a great rest of your day. Peace out, everybody.